It would be nice to know if you both already had a look at the website that we sent.
Okay, so two things happened since Gunnar's talk then. First of all was a panel discussion at the Hygiene Institute with people from the Charité and the Denkmalschutz, the historic preservation authorities, and a couple of other people. And the gist of it was that the Charité is like more and more willing to cooperate. It was like finally completely conceded that the Hygiene Institute is definitely saved, and they kind of did a 180 and went on about how fantastic this building is and that every handrail is holy and what a fantastic design, and they totally want to keep this and preserve this in a very nice way, although they already had put in a motion to demolish this as well 2 years ago. But okay, not complaining. So apparently they recognized the value of that building and they want to keep using it. And on the other hand, even with the Mäusebunker, they still say they don't know how to finance restoring it or keeping it. And since there's no proposition from politics or from heritage protection either where that money would come from, the only thing they see as a possibility is basically demolishing it and putting some other rather random buildings there to keep this whole area as kind of a research campus situation. Of course, there was a lot of resistance to that idea, but the general consensus was it's going to be cost prohibitive to repair it, so let's tear it down. We suggested that there are possibilities. First of all, of course, the very concrete suggestion from König and Brandelhuber to just buy the whole thing and do something by themselves. And the Charité basically said they would be unhappy if they had to give up the property, because I mean, if you look at it historically, the reason why it is there is the whole axis of the Benjamin Franklin Hospital and then the Hygiene Institute and then the animal laboratories as kind of a scientific, I don't know, assembly line, if you will, of antidotes, and having this whole area as a extended area from the Ben Franklin Hospital, of course, is good for them to keep it clustered. But at the same time, for the first time, they said they wouldn't be completely opposed to a property switch. So that's what's being debated right now. The heritage authorities and the Charité behind the scenes are talking about the possibility that the Charité would give up the property with the Mäusebunker, basically give it to the heritage authorities or the city, like have it be their problem, and in return get some different kind of property that they can develop with whatever they want to do. And that's still on the table. And the last thing I heard about it was last night. There was an online workshop or something like that from the party Die Linke. It was a big thing with, like, I don't know, 80 participants, and the Senator of Culture, Mr. Lederer, was there, and it was basically all kinds of initiatives for cultural projects, and we were invited to, and it was a kind of a general discussion and like a smaller subgroup discussion thing and everything. The biggest thing I took away from this was from one member of the Senate from Die Linke that told me that apparently the idea of switching properties is on the table right now, is being actively discussed, and there might be a chance that something will come out of this soon, which goes against what I heard before, that basically Klaus Lederer and the mayor Michael Müller want to kind of push it to after the next election for Berlin, which is a year from now. which would mean everything would just stand still for a whole year, and who knows which departments go to which party after the next election, and maybe we have a much worse chance after that, which was like ringing all kinds of alarm bells for me. So apparently it's not the case. Apparently it's still actively being investigated and discussed, and there haven't been any results. And the question also is, well, if you can figure out a switch of properties, who's getting it, and is the Senate that's then sitting on the Mäusebunker willing to just sell it to a private owner, which always comes with its own problems? And is the city really willing right now to sell more public property and buildings and land to private owners, where lately the consensus has been that all of this privatization after the fall of the wall has been detrimental and it's trying to be undone right now. So big question mark on the future still, but I mean, we've already reached more goals than we would have thought in the beginning, big time. So part of the ensemble, the Hygiene Institute across the street, is saved. Wonderful. The owner even acknowledges that it's good architecture, which means it didn't sound like they just want to rip everything out and alter it in some hideous ways. And the original demolition time of this fall is definitely off the table. It's just gonna stay empty for now, and there are active discussions in how to save it. And we're also very lucky that the Lederer, the Senator for Culture, is very much on board with this issue and has made it some of his priorities, and that gives the top-down leeway you need politically to keep at this topic. And I heard even Michael Müller has visited the Mäusebunker and in theory is for its preservation, which is very important because usually these things just kind of marinate a little in the lower levels of politics, and then nothing really happens, and then one day it's just off the table. So those are all very positive developments, and we're still unsure what's going to happen in the end, but so far so good.
Is that lens of cohabitation a political agent that you could use in the dialogue?
Yeah, I'd like to respond to this. We do not want to make any concrete proposals what to do with it, because I think this is not our field of work. Our ambition is to spread the knowledge, to raise awareness. And if we would come up with our own proposal, this would diminish our efforts in keeping it. So I at some time made a design, and then Felix prevented me from posting it on our website because that's not our job. It's much more credible for other people to think outside the box. We leave this job up to you.
We're in the business of understanding what's there and trying to protect, and I think it wouldn't be credible if we made any concrete suggestions, but still, of course, general or the essential question of preservation is what's going to happen with it and what are strategies for keeping this alive. Also with raising money, I mean, there are foundations like the Getty Foundation or the Wüstenrot Foundation that spend tens of millions on restoring and preserving architecturally significant buildings from the 60s and 70s that I'm sure would be a great way of securing finance. But a key problem is that the building is very large. You have a lot of space, which of course is nice because you can do a lot of things, but at the same time, the building is kind of at the outskirts of the city where the surrounding infrastructure is struggling a bit to support what could be there, and would be struggling to support, I don't know, hundreds of people working there. And the reason it is so big and it worked in the past was the actual humans that worked in there, it wasn't so many, and you don't need a restaurant or a bakery for the mice and the horses that were in there. Keep in mind where it is, what the infrastructure around is, and but also what kind of possibilities that gives you. I mean, you also have it can also help in some concepts that it's not like right in the center of the city, but by a canal. And I think especially your ideas with the local animal wildlife, and if there's some kind of ideas of symbiosis there, work just because it is where it is. But those are all things to consider.
Can I get back to the idea of humans and animals sharing a space, Felix? I'm waiting.
Oh. Well, the question is, what do the animals want?
Get some cohabitation experts in there.
So would you be interested in working in the Mäusebunker, maybe a co-working space? Or would you rather live there? What's that? Oh, he's asking if there are free mice. I think he doesn't really understand the concept, but I think he might be into it.
I mean, this is exemplary somehow, no? Because cohabitation and humans sharing space with your pet, it's a huge trap of romanticism. Mäusebunker could ever become a building where you are engaged with wilderness, because it's so much embedded in the former use of this building, where cohabitation didn't exist. It's not in the language somehow. It's not in the vocabulary that the former use ever intended to use.
Last year, I was working in a museum which in Peenemünde was in the Nazi research facility for missiles and rockets and weapons. And this used to be a huge industrial complex, and now it's basically wilderness. And you can see how architecture transformed into a complete new hybrid of post-industrial, post-urban, rural landscape. There are some protected buildings which are not in use by humans, but they are home to bats. It's really a lot about bats. Everything that you do in this space is a negotiation between heritage protection and natural protection, because there are so many animals which are protected, and they live in these old Nazi weapon research facilities, and it's mostly bats, but it's also swifts and swallows, eagles, falcons, kestrels, I guess, and also snakes. I can tell you it's absolutely not romantic at all. Like everyday stuff. When the sun goes down and the bats are flying over your head and they shit on your bicycle, and also when kestrels feed their chicks and they're screaming so loud, it's not a romantic idea. It's just everyday life. You're living together, you're working together with animals, and they make sounds and they stink and they shit on your bicycle.
I think it's difficult for the Mäusebunker to get to a state like that, though, because it's so impenetrable right now. It's designed to be hermetically sealed off from everything outside. I think it's even designed to be airtight. So for this place that Gunnar spoke about, you basically just had to leave the door open more or less, and it was much more connected with the outside to begin with, at least in the dilapidated state it was. I think it would take significant alterations to the Mäusebunker to get something to a point where there can be any kind of interaction with the surroundings and with the natures, to basically remove or alter the seal and really break it open and start some kind of interaction with the surroundings. It was precisely designed to not do that. And you have to turn around this original design intention to be as hermetically sealed as possible on its head. I don't know, Gunnar, how sealed off were the premises before?
Imagine factory buildings. trees grow inside. There was a shed for a locomotive where the doors are open, and now it's full of birds.
But this is also working because there was a period where human was not here, no? You cannot force cohabitation. You have also to install a kind of relationship between them. And maybe you need first to install or to let's say, grow this nature and this non-human before human to come in, no?
In this case, in Peenemünde, it was also a power station, and it was in use until it was used as a museum. So there were humans working there continuously, but when they decided to shut down parts of the building and just leave the door open, then the animals moved in.
Wondering because it has something to do with mindset. If you were a worker in this power station and then some parts of the building gets shut down, you don't have access anymore, there's suddenly like a snake in the hallway. I mean, it's not very comfortable, but there's a shift in the mindset of, okay, now I have to deal with it. I'm now living in this more cohabitative state. That's the core issue, I think. That's probably why you cannot design this space really.
It's always also a design choice to leave a door open or not use a part of a building. It's not only a design choice to draw a plan or to invent a new detail. It's also a design choice to only use parts of a building and leave the rest open. That's also what architecture is about. As an architect, you not only design for a use case, you also design the use. So you can decide, we're just going to leave it like it is. And sometimes in architecture, it's the best decision to not do something.
By doing that, you need also a shift in your mind and in your point of view that you are not delivering maybe a mending object, but you are more, let's say, doing a process which have empirical observation, no? Because you don't know yet the results. You have to work really with observation and without really knowing where you go.
La place est déjà belle, somehow this project of Lacaton-Vassal, where they had this place in a village, and there was the city asked for them to redesign this public space, and they came back to the city and said, nothing must be done on this place. It's already in perfect condition, and they had to go through every possibility to redesign a space, to turn it around and arrive at the exact same point. This has a process behind it. It's difficult not to do anything.
I think it's possible if you put it in a procedural way, and I think it might be a good approach here, because when you begin now, there is a big question mark on how wildlife and the surroundings are gonna react to the new situation. But if you put a process into place, you say, I don't know, it costs 50 million and we're gonna only spend 10 million in the beginning, go with it for 5 years and then reassess. We have this procedure written down, signed off and delivered it in this way. And then over the next 15 or 20 years, we go back every 5 years, every 10 years, see what happened, what went well, what needs to be done, and adjust the project from here. I think if you can make it concrete enough that everybody can see that this is a fixed thing, then this might have a chance. I think politically, you have to sell it in the most definitive way possible, although of course it is a very open process.
I think there's a huge challenge in developing positive imagery and a positive vision for something which doesn't need to be radically changed. The only thing that has to be changed is how we look at it. It's a very radical idea not to change something, because you can use the tools of architecture to change the perspective on something.
I just thought of something else. I think it might be difficult if it's more of a competition format where other proposals are flashier. Like Gunnar says, imagery is important, but I think it might actually be a plus point for decision makers that you would say, this is not going to cost you much right now. You have to like sign off on making the funds available for the next, I don't know, 20 years. But that's easier for them to do because in 20 years, they won't have this job any longer. It's going to be somebody else's problem. And they feel like they have saved money in the short run, where actually in the long run, it might be a really good system to not spend any.
This situation reminds me a little bit about a conference which I attended a few years ago, where we talked about the possibility of listing a nuclear power stations as a heritage site. And the best path forward is basically to do nothing until the radiations levels sink, and just wait for 100 years or so. And maybe by that time we have better ways of dealing with old nuclear power stations. But it's also something that's very hard to communicate, because you can persuade somebody if you have a big vision for something, but it's really hard to persuade somebody if your only vision is don't touch.
The biggest question or issue for the Charité, and also money-wise, is that it just has such a huge amount of technical systems and HVAC systems and everything in it, and it's also a lot of asbestos. And one of the biggest reasons the Charité says it can't be done is that modernizing those systems that basically have never really been touched since it was built, which actually speaks to the quality of the systems that they lasted that long, but now they're kind of falling apart. So yeah, basically the big argument is, if we want to keep running this building, we have to invest tens of millions to get all of these complicated systems back online. If you switch the narrative and you say, we don't have to modernize all of this and get it back in working condition, we'll just open the windows or add more windows to get air in this way, take out the old systems, but leave everything else in place, or even leave the old systems in there, just not turn them on again for now. It might still be a habitable space in a lot of places. I mean, the problem is that the building goes very deep in, so opening a window, I don't know, 15 meters over there might not be good enough for the whole building. But I think a lot of the existing technology and the refurbishment of the existing technology can be reduced in the way that you describe.
There can be architectural ideas of alteration of the building, and I guess this is best, as you described, Felix, to introduce like progressively, also politically, because it's such a huge building, such a huge footprint, so difficult, everything's so heavy and enclosed. Use a storytelling method to shift the mindset that kind of needs very specific characters, let's say, which are interacting in the building. Maybe they're not yet physically in the space, but they're throwing ideas in, but they're not designing the building. They're using it. They're using it in a different way, and through that use and through their wishes, whether they're human or non-human, there will be a narrative written, and through that narrative, somehow the building changes gradually, progressively, and that's actually our ambition. So I think that this Bunker Plus thing is in a super weird state, because at one point we do not really design. We're asking those questions, what cohabitation could mean.
And I think there's a big potential for utopian imagery, or imagery that goes a little deeper into the future than just like, in 2 years this could be it, and we have some butterflies on the picture. And there's this general lack of positive futuristic visions for a while now. Like, ideas like, I don't know, from Buckminster Fuller or Archigram, or also positive science fiction, is kind of out of style, has been for a while. We just get reboots for Blade Runner, but not for 2001 Space Odyssey. I think the time is ripe for more positive visions too. I mean, dystopia always has its place, but utopia also has its place. And it's nice, and it's a chance for the narrative to go a little deeper and be like, this could be 20, 30, 40, 50 years from now. The difficulty for you to illustrate this narrative is that the whole idea is we don't know yet what it's going to look like, but still to invite the mind to have to think of positive outcomes and what's going to be there in 30, 40, 50 years. And if you invite those imaginations and this narrative, everybody involved also starts thinking more.
There's no initial condition, there's no initial starting point where you have to be from where you start. You can start from zero. You can do it just the way you do it.